everybody, Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa. Today I'm here with Lynn Mackey, who is hot on the campaign trail for Contra Costa Superintendent of Schools.
Yes.
And you were actually walking before this interview and I was playing golf. So we're here on a Sunday afternoon because that's the only time we could really make this work.
Yep.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I was just out in the community, out in Brentwood, walking and knocking on doors and meeting people and doing well.
Cool. So how did you get into education, and here you are, 20 years later, and I'm going to go be superintendent of the county. How did that even?
Well, I have a interesting experience with education. I have an interesting relationship with education. As a young person, I ended up dropping out of school in middle school. The education system just did not work for me. I'd been kicked out of a couple schools for truancy, really. I was a truant from the time I was in 6th grade. And then as a young adult in my early 20s, I had a young daughter. I had my daughter as a teenager. I went back to school. I went and got my GED, and I went to DVC and learned how to go to school and learned what an amazing thing it is to have great teachers and a great education. From there, I went on to Mills College, and when I graduated from Mills, I got a job at our county jails, which is one of the programs that the County Office of Education runs. The County Superintendent runs the school departments in our 3 county jails. So I became a teacher there, and I taught GED, high school subjects, and it really became, the work of the county office really became my passion. I really felt like I could give back to the people in those programs that we lead what I had been given. I had been given a second chance. I had been transformed by education and been given a life, and I wanted to do that with the people that we serve at our county office. So I was a teacher, and then I was a curriculum specialist. I went and got my master's in educational leadership and went out and worked in districts for a couple years as a vice principal, and came back as a principal, and then a director, and now I'm deputy superintendent of schools. So the County Office of Education has a really unique role in the community, and it's a role that I am deeply passionate about and deeply care about.
Sure. And so before we get into all the campaign stuff, you kind of just said something interesting about in middle school you dropped out. What was the moment where you went back and kind of, how did that turn around? Like, was there somebody special, or? Well,
I was in my early 20s. I had a realization that this was not working. I was unemployable, I was uneducated. I basically had a 6th grade education when I had this wonderful young daughter, and she was going to school. She was in elementary school, and I just, through the help of some great friends, realized that I could turn my life around. And I had a wonderful GED teacher who really didn't treat me, she treated me with respect and dignity, and just like, you can do this. You can have whatever kind of life you want.
Nice.
And then I had amazing teachers at Diablo Valley College, which, and they told me I can do anything I want. So that really helped me change my life.
So you not only have the education, you have the life experience.
I do have the life experience, yes.
And so you made that decision to run, and now all of a sudden you're coming up with a campaign. Just having been there for 20 years, what are some of your biggest priorities that you see immediately needing to work on?
So the County Office of Education, our roles and responsibilities have changed quite a bit just in the last few years. Now we oversee what is called the local control, LCAPs, local accountability plans for the districts, which is really a new role. So it is really working with the school districts to make sure that their plans are meeting the needs of the most underserved students in our county. So that is a priority area, is to really work with them so that they not only feel supported, but they're also accountable to these groups that they are supposed to be meeting the needs of.
And I'm gonna stop you right there, because I think what people need to understand is LCAP in itself. It's a fancy word that people throw out, but they don't really understand what it is.
Okay.
Can you kind of break it down, like, here's our LCAP plan from the district, then what do you guys do with it?
Sure.
Like, what do you look for?
Okay. So, and we also write our own LCAP. So I've been both the writer and the reader. I've written our LCAP and worked with our stakeholder groups, and then I've done the same with the districts and been a reader. So an LCAP has priority areas designated by the state, 8 for the districts, 10 for the county offices, and it makes you focus on areas of service for certain student populations. So it is students who receive free and reduced lunch, homeless and foster students, and students who are English language learners. People who need extra support. And we also look at the district's data to see if they have gaps in their data, to see the achievement gap, to see if certain student groups are not meeting the academic goals in the plans. We look for areas of academic achievement. We look for school climate. So the school districts have to focus on school climate, survey their students,
Sure.
survey their parents. One big part of an LCAP is that all districts have to have student and parent and stakeholder engagement. So they have to work with their community groups and their unions, their various stakeholders in the community to make sure everybody's looking at how these particular dollars, because they're supplemental dollars
Sure.
that you're getting for these groups, to see that they're being spent in a way that everybody thinks is the most appropriate and the most powerful for the students.
So LCAP, important. to
LCAP is the LCAP is very important, and right now we're at an in-between place with the LCAP. We don't want it to be too bureaucratic. And
But it's going that way, though.
It is. It is starting to feel, to me, as both a reader and a writer of the LCAP, it feels very bureaucratic. It feels very, we've had to hire people. Districts have to hire people to help do this LCAP or take the work away from other work away when you're having to do this LCAP, because it is a big document. It is a lot about checking boxes and marking to make sure that you are doing the work.
And so I don't want to go into the weeds on LCAP,
Yeah.
but back to your priorities.
Yes.
You're on number 2.
So another priority is really improving those services for those most vulnerable and at-risk students in our county. So really working with the districts and working with the communities to make sure those students who end up in juvenile hall or end up in our jail, or they have such severe special education needs that the districts can't provide for them, really doing a job where we can work with the students and get them back into the districts if that is what the families and the students want to do, and just really having high expectations for those students and complete wraparound services. So we aren't just focusing on academics, but we're focusing on the social and emotional needs of those students.
Sure.
And then another key area that I really want to focus on is the financial oversight that we do for our districts. So we have financial oversight where we approve their budgets and make sure that they are on track. And right now we're really hitting a time in our state, we aren't unique in this in our county, where we have kind of flat funding. Our funding is leveling off. Districts are starting to have to think about making cuts instead of expanding, because either they have declining enrollment, or there's fixed costs such as pensions and medical and buildings. Those costs are going up, but we aren't getting any more money.
Yeah.
So it's really working with those districts so that they can function the most efficient and effective way possible.
So how do you work in a declining enrollment district? How do you work with them to figure out what actually should be cut or shouldn't be cut? What's kind of your philosophy on that?
Well, what we do with each individual district has their own elected board. So they work with their superintendent, they appoint a superintendent, and they work with their board on making those cuts. And then what they do is they bring it to the county office to show what they've done. Now, if they struggle, like we've just recently worked with one of the small districts, we sent in our CBO and an advisor to work with them to say, and work with their community group. We worked with their board and their community group to look at how can we cut as far away from the classroom as possible, because that is the goal not only of the county office but for all the districts, is to, if they have to cut, how do we cut as much as administratively as possible and as far away from the classroom. And then they put together a plan, a financial plan, and they brought it to the board, and then they approved that plan to make cuts so that they will be able to be certified by the state, because you have to be able to be certified by the state to show that you can pay your bills.
And so do you think, because I know you guys oversee all the money that's coming into the districts and the budgets and all that, but it seems like every 2 years for 4 years, depending on the office, all these legislators come in and say, oh, I want to fix public education, I want to fund them, more funding. So they run on that, but it seems like their actions actually do the opposite, where it's almost like the first to cut.
Yeah.
And so do you think that their funding public education enough, or is it just kind of a game?
No, we are not funding public education enough. We are like 46th, 47th, depending on which report you read, nationally for our funding. And we're, what, 6th? We have the 6th biggest economy in the world in California. So we have this old archaic system for funding education. It is called Prop 98. It's about 30 years old, and it gives you a basic minimum standard for how you have to fund education. We are now just at the minimum. When we say we are fully funding Prop 98, that means we are, it's like receiving minimum wage in education. We do not put education as a priority on a state level. And because, you know, in order to fund education, we will have to cut somewhere else, or we'll have to raise taxes. And when we get into that conversation, it becomes a very uncomfortable conversation on a state and legislative level. But if we want to prioritize education, we're going to have to put more money into it. We can't say, you know, I've had people say, well, we just need to cut more. We are at the minimum level. We are at the minimum level for adults to students. So we have overcrowded classrooms. We have the lowest level of adult to counselors. It can be anywhere upward to 1 to 1,700. It's student to counselors. So all these things that we know we need for our students, districts often aren't able to fund because they just don't have the money for it.
You know, when you talk about budgets, it goes into a teacher pay retention issue because teachers can't afford to work where they live. Obviously, teachers need more, but do you think that, I mean, you guys have lost a lot of good teachers because of higher paying industries elsewhere, and I mean, how do you fix that?
You know, it's a bigger problem than just countywide. We actually at the county office have really great retention. You know, we're the highest paying in compensation in the county because we do work with the most challenging students in the county. But when you really, even then, even at the highest paying, they still don't make enough to really be able to live and afford this area unless you've been here for 30 years, unless you've been a teacher for 30 years. We really do have to start looking statewide at funding education better so that we can increase our teacher salaries. It really is important for teachers to be able to live and work in the community. You know, we have teachers that are commuting in, you know, for a couple hours to get to work, and that is taxing, it's draining, and then you expect them to plan and work with parents and stay late. And we really do need to work with our legislators and really get the word out and get just communities to say, this is enough, we need to change things.
So I would like to see more of the whole affordable housing for teachers program, and I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, oh my goodness, Tony Thurman that's been trying to push a bill to get more access for funding for teachers to live. And, you know, and it could be as simple as for the first 2 to 5 years, they could be in these affordable housings just to save some money to be able to buy a house.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of goes with that first 2 to 5 years is the hardest, correct?
Yeah, the first 2 to 5 years, so one of the programs that the county office runs is a teacher induction program. It is when a teacher is new and they've just gotten their first job, and then we work with them on coaching and mentoring and giving them support. And the first 2 to 5 years, you'll often lose teachers because it's an overwhelming job. It can often feel, you know, you go into teaching for your heart and because you want to teach and because you want to work with students. And it can feel like you've entered into a bureaucratic landmine of paperwork and testing and classroom management. And so we really have to work with the teachers to support them and get them through the hurdles of where they learn their classroom management style, they get a handle on their curriculum, and then they stay. And then they get the rewards of teaching.
So how's teaching changed in, or actually I shouldn't even say teaching, but how's the industry changed since you started 20 years ago? What's been like the biggest, other than technology?
I've been through, so in the last 20 years, I've been through 2 changes of the standards. So we redid the standards statewide. You know, it was right when I came in. It was maybe about 19 years ago. We had a big realignment with the standards, and then we did again at the Common Core standards. And that really shifted the way people teach and the standards and the whole
I learned I couldn't do first graders' homework.
It can be challenging, yeah. I was in a math workshop for very young students, and it was a whole different way of learning math. But I also know we've been talking about, I know my parents talked about new math, and I talked about new math and with my own daughter. So I think every generation kind of goes through having to learn a whole new way of thinking math. So that has been one of the changes. And then we went through the whole period of No Child Left Behind, which really focused on testing and really didn't do us a whole lot of good by focusing on just academic testing. And we've pulled away from the arts and creativity and critical thinking. And I believe that the pendulum has swung, and we're getting back in where you're going to see more arts as long as we can afford it, and where we're going to see less testing and people opting out of testing and looking at multiple measures of how a school is successful. So instead of just looking at how did they do on the reading and math test, now you look at a variety of things. You look at how their school culture is, how's their suspension rate, how is their absenteeism rate. So when you're looking at schools and districts now, you're looking at a much broader range of topics.
Is it kind of moving more towards like ROP style, pathway style, career-based, so people get real-world experience versus kind of memorizing out of a book just for a test?
Well, you know, what I think is a really wonderful thing that is happening, and what we do at the county office is we run ROP CTE programs in a number of the districts. And how we run them, they are no longer just the old school wood shop and metal shop.
Nothing wrong with that.
Those were my favorite classes in middle school before I dropped out. But we have like fire science, we have robotics, we have engineering. And since these courses are hands-on, they're technical, you can get into these fields and make a living wage, but we also have them so that they're A to G qualified. So they also qualify you if you choose to go to college. So when you can get to the end of your high school path and you have a bunch of CTE or ROP courses under your belt, but they're also A to G, you have a choice. So it's no longer kind of a tracking the way it used to be, where it was like you're either a vocational guy or you're a college person, right? And
or
now,
lazy.
What?
Or lazy.
No. No.
I was on the lazy side. I know. I shouldn't say that, but it's okay.
It might have been it just wasn't interesting. I mean, I really found that I was bored with school. I did not like the social scene. I'm more of an introvert, so schools don't really work for introverts, and I was a test taker. I could take any test and pass it, but I did not like being in class. I was bored, and I just checked out and started leaving.
But you saw the repercussions of those actions and decided to fix it.
Not for a number of years later.
But eventually.
I mean, yeah, eventually
Once it
I
hit
did.
real world.
I left in middle school, and I didn't come back until my early 20s. Yeah.
I didn't really care till I was like 25.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't really, you know, they kind of check out. They don't want to go right on to college, so we really need to give them opportunities to make a decent living wage when they graduate from high school.
Yeah, I'd actually like to correct that. I did pass high school and college. I just didn't apply myself till about 25.
There we go.
So, moving on. Communication's a big part of the district because you are interacting with 18 other districts around the county. And a lot of people don't really know what you guys do. How do you work on improving communication? What are some of your ideas of not only interacting with the districts, but also the communities?
So there's a number of things. I don't, like, you know how all your local newspapers, you'll see something from your local superintendent?
I have one.
Yes, so like in your newspaper, we can have things about the county office, right? And we can do things digitally, do things on social media, outreach to them in the same way that local school districts do, but tell them about the great work that we are doing at the county office. And the other is communicate, really the districts do know what we do. The superintendents all meet with the county superintendent regularly. We're all on committees together. The associate superintendents get together, student programs gets together, curriculum and instructions. So it's really the greater community that doesn't know the work we do and that doesn't know how we collaborate. And it's really getting that message out and showing that we're doing great work. We can always improve. We are what we consider like a continuous improvement type of agency. We're always looking to improve. So it is getting the word out and just getting that message out there.
So you think it's more just going digital versus relying on other media and
I think it's
to
doing
carry the message?
I think it's actually doing a little bit of everything.
Along with the communication, how do you work to improve engagement with that? So you know, obviously you put out the message, but how do you increase engagement? Because, I mean, you could talk all the numbers you want on budgets and go after teachers for, you know, whatever reason, but how do you actually increase engagement to get them to do something?
With the districts?
Just everybody in the community, get them involved.
Well, so part of that LCAP that I was talking about before has a big community engagement piece. And part of that, we work with the districts to look at their community engagement and see how they're doing, and they're working on increasing their community engagement every year. They have to actually, they have like a baseline and a metric, and they work on increasing it. Part of it is reaching out to parents and figuring out what do they want to do. You know, we think we know. All of us think, since we went through school, since we're all students, so we all know how it works. But we really do have to engage with the community and the business community particularly to see how do they want to engage with the schools. And we bring in, there is a program called Earn and Learn, which is run, it was started through a grant that the county office was involved with the Workforce Investment Board and a number of the districts. And it is a way to engage businesses so that they're engaging with the schools. And it is a wonderful, thriving program that we really want to see get more fully developed and reach out to all the districts. And it really allows businesses to come into the schools and talk with students, and it allows students to have internships and opportunities to engage in the world prior to graduating.
One of the hot buttons these days in education and on campus is school safety, and there's a giant debate of guns in classroom. And I don't really want to go there, that debate right now, but what's been the county's direction and kind of your opinion on school safety, and how do you improve it?
So what the county has done is we are working with Sandy Hook Promise, which is a group that was born out of the Sandy Hook tragedy, a group of parents who had lost students, children at the Sandy Hook. And we're working with them. They are a national group, and they work on 5 different areas. One is inclusion. It's to help students feel included and part of the community, because we know when people feel included and attached, less likely to go off and do something like that. And it's also working on school safety plans and making, you know, there's a fine balance, because I've been hearing from parents about drills that are scaring their kids. You know, it's scary to have drills. And so it's working on really sensible yet inclusive safety plans, and working with your local law enforcement to make sure that there are good, solid safety plans. And then it is also working with about suicide prevention and mental health in the schools, which are really key. And it's, if you know about something and you know a student struggling, to really reach out and get an adult involved and to try to mitigate that. So we are working with them, and we have met with the districts to offer them to participate with Sandy Hook Promise, because it is one of, school should be a safe place. Students shouldn't have to go to school in fear of, you know, and parents shouldn't be in fear that their student's not going to come home at the end of the day. So it should be our job #1 to make sure that everybody has a safe place to go, and it's going to be a whole community effort. It can't just be left on the shoulders of one school.
Because I think that's part of the issue too, is when it comes to bullying, suicide, you know, fighting, you know, whatever it may be, it all falls under safety. And you guys could talk about a plan you want to implement it right now, but the reality is it's 6 months down the road before it starts to get implemented. So, I mean, not to kind of put you on the spot, but I mean, how do you start something like that, and what would you like to see?
Well, you start it by just starting it, which we did. We we just convened all the superintendent convened all the superintendents and said, let's start this. You know, we can think about it and put it into plans all day long, but we just have to do it, and we just have to move forward. And that's what I'd like to see happen. Just let's start it today. Let's start the conversation right now. And it's going on. It is going on across the county.
So one of the big issues facing basically the state is the influx of charter schools entering into certain districts, and it's the lower performing areas. What are your thoughts on charter schools?
So I think all charter schools need to be held to the same standards and the same accountability and the same transparency as our traditional public schools. I do think there are some good public charter schools, and that they were born out of a need and out of a community uprising, and that's really was the original intent of charter schools, was to give families and students other options. But what's been happening is these charter schools who have more of like they're almost like a franchise. Mm-hmm. They're a franchise that moves in, it kind of divides the district, it divides the communities. And what I really think needs to happen is when we need to work with our legislator to tighten up some of the laws around authorizing of charter schools, because right now it is pretty easy to get authorized, either on, if you don't get authorized on your district level, then on your county or state level. It's pretty easy, and then there's a lot of gray area where they aren't as accountable as the traditional public schools. And it pulls money away from those traditional public schools that are already hurting. So we need to do a couple things, is work on changing those laws. We need to do outreach to those parents and find out what is it that they're really needing and wanting. Why are they seeking out these other schools? What? And then try to work on those areas and improve those public, traditional public schools. I do believe parents should have options, but I really don't think we should divide up and tear apart our systems to give those parents those options. We should learn how to work together and have options.
Sure, and that's what's kind of interesting to me is that when you have these big applications, school boards get it on a Thursday, they got to approve it the next week. There's not really enough time to review. But more than that is if they decline it, at each step, it's like they lose control or oversight ability, which makes no sense. Because then if your office declines it for whatever reason, now all of a sudden it goes to the state and it's like, okay, do what you want type of thing. Not in those words, but that's just paraphrased.
Right.
So, I mean, how do you improve transparency other than a district and charter school basically agreeing to the standards, which they're not going to do? I mean,
and there are ways to improving the oversight of it. You can visit more. There's a criteria from the state, like a criteria from the state on charter oversight, and it is you can do that more. You can engage more. And then what I feel the county office needs to do better is be transparent about those results. So we go out and we review charters and we tell them you need to do this, this, or this. But nobody knows that. And so they just get the message, nobody is reviewing these. And I think it has to do with, again, back to communication. Sure. It's like, what does a county office do? Because that message doesn't get communicated. Yeah. They don't know that we've done this pretty extensive review of the school, and here's the areas we told them they need to improve on, here's the areas they're doing okay, and that they have to act on those. Yeah. And so nobody knows that, because we aren't communicating it, and I would make sure that that was communicated.
So with charter schools, you have this oversight of what they're actually doing, but a lot of their financials are also kind of hidden in the background. Reserves are there. I mean, how does it become apples to apples at that point, or at any point?
Right. Well, part of the, how would I say this? How would it become apples to apples? One of the ways in order for it to become apples to apples is they have to be held to the exact same standards, and at this point they are not. So what we need to do is we also review their budgets just the way we review other districts' budgets, and we just need to make that transparent also. It is, it's about really the community knowing what the oversight process is, and that there is oversight.
So how do we get to an apples to apples scenario? Because right now the rules actually are pretty loose for charters to appear like they're getting ahead, when reality is maybe they're closer in level playing field in terms of test scores than what it appears.
Right. One is communication. We really need to communicate it. There is like a misnomer that the charter schools don't even have to report their test data, but they have a dashboard, a state dashboard, just like any other school. And there's a misnomer that we don't have to do the financial audits for the charters, and we do have to do the financial audits, to the point where we could do a
forensic audit.
A forensic audit if needed. And that information needs to be publicly shared. It needs to, the community knows what's going on with these schools, with all of our schools, and with the county office.
But would you say that even if the community has all that data, and this is just me going into the weeds right now, but
no, go ahead.
you can provide all the data you want to the community. Do they really care?
No.
Because I almost think that they're always looking for a negative to just type of thing, and then nothing changes.
I think people are looking for both the negative and the positive, right? And I don't think just giving people the data. You know, somebody recently said, your budget should just be put online and made public.
It is.
It is, but nobody can make sense of those, right?
Sure.
So what we have to do is, when we do our oversight, is summarize it. It's not just like putting out the raw data and saying, here's what we did. It's summarizing the situation and letting people know in a way that's meaningful. Do I think people will care? I'm not sure. I think there's going to be people who are always going to be on one side of the issue and are always going to be on the other. But I do know, as I've been talking to a lot of people. I've been knocking on a lot of doors. I've been listening to a lot of people. People do care, and most people live somewhere in that gray area. They really do.
They just want it available if they want to look at it. And that's
they do.
Kind of just needs to be more easily accessible.
Yes, most people want good schools for their students, however that can happen, however they achieve that. And they want good public schools, whether that's a charter or a traditional school. They just want good schools for their students.
And I did find your guys' budget online within 5 minutes, so one of your opponents that wanted to claim it wasn't there, search the internet better.
It's pretty easy to find.
So,
it is easy to find.
On that note, we're going to end this kind of on a fun one. If you had a magic wand, and you could do anything you want with the state legislator and create a law, or aside from more money, what kind of law would you implement if you had a magic wand?
What kind of law? I'm not a big law person. I don't think more laws makes things
or policy.
How about this? You know what I really want? I want education to be, I want young people and education to be our primary focus as a state. I want every decision we make to be about how is this going to affect young people from birth all the way. You know, not even, I have a friend that recently has been going around to different city councils and talking about a plan for, and I don't remember the name of it, but it's about looking at your community that supports an 8-year-old and an 80-year-old. Like, those are our most vulnerable and most important. And I think we need to really reprioritize what we focus on, and we need to make young people and students a priority. From birth on, if we were to focus on that birth to 5 years old, so much stuff would change. If we would close that vocabulary gap and the achievement gap when they're young, it would solve itself later on. And so that would be my magic dream, is that that it's all about people, that we really do, it's all about civility and people and how we treat people, our most vulnerable young people, all the way to our older, our elders. So that would be my dream.
Very nice.
Yes.
So on that note, you want to give a final plug to your website and how people can get in touch with you, donate,
yes,
why they should vote for you? Just a little plug.
So I don't know if I mentioned, but I am Deputy Superintendent of Schools. I've been at the county office for 21 years. I would love and appreciate your vote on June 5th. You can find more information about me on my website, lynnmackey.org. Please spread the word, spread my name. You can call me, you can email me. My phone number's on my website, my email's on my website. Please, if you have questions, give me a call or email me, and I'd be happy to talk to you. So get out and vote June 5th. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate
Thank you.
it. Again, I'm Mike Burkholder, Contra Costa Today. Please like, subscribe, follow, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.